this rum? What cocktail and why? On my left, New Orleans native who needs no introduction. You know what he looks like. Mr. Jeff Beachcomber, author of... we have Jeff to thank for the greatest modern body of work on all things rum and tiki. And rather excitingly, Jeff will be opening his bar here in New Orleans in just a couple of months. Latitude 29. On Jeff's left, owner of America's most lauded modern tiki bar. Ladies and gentlemen, from San Francisco, Mr. Mai Tais. And on Martin's left, somebody who probably needs no introduction to Tales because he's here every shagging year, usually with another 4 or 5 products that it really kills his colleague Guillaume to try and sell. From Cognac Ferrand and Plantation Rums, Mr. Alexandre Gabriel. Rum as we know it is not how rum started off. The first sugarcane distillates started being made, certainly in the New World, in Brazil, when Portugal occupied it and began by the 1550s. There's over 100 sugar mills in Pernambuco and around Recife, the modern areas, and they were making distillates. But as they later taught Caribbean people to distill, they weren't making sugar so that they'd have lots of molasses to make delicious, tasty rums like these. When they distilled stuff, they were just being efficient, sustainable, you might say. Majority of what they distilled was distilled from the scum that you had to sweep off the top of sugar when you boiled it to clarify it and to actually make sugar from cane juice. And the earliest recipes that we have are for about all sugar scum, and later on in the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica, 1/3 sugar scum, 1/3 molasses, and 1/3 dunder. And it was hundreds and hundreds of years before we had anything resembling a brand of rum. You bought rum from a shipper by the barrel. It was used to pay for the upkeep of your plantation. It was a very funny letter from a plantation manager to his absentee owners. He actually wrote an open letter to all absentee owners. He says, I know you think it's a really clever idea to stay in France or Denmark or England and enjoy all the money that I'm sending you, but if you underpay your plantation manager, he's going to give you worse sugar so he gets more molasses so he can distill more rum and make more money. I think it was particularly cool that he was himself a plantation manager writing this letter to the people who employed him. It was very good of him to do that. From Brazil up into the Caribbean, people taught interested commercial parties how to distill. After the Dutch took over the Brazilian sugar industry, the Dutch Geoctroeerde West-Indische Company, the GWIC. You've probably all heard of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. Yeah, this wasn't them. This was their shitty sister company. And, you know, it's like the little brother. You always get stuck with the shitty jobs. They got America and South America. The VOC had, like, Indonesia, which was a license to print money. The possessions that the GWIC had include the New Netherlands, which is most of modern-day Massachusetts and New York, and they swapped them all for a sugar island, or a sugar colony, Suriname, and Run in Indonesia, because New York was pretty much a beaver pelt trading center back then. And even then, there wasn't a whole lot of money in beaver. So they swapped it. They swapped it for something much more lucrative. And the Dutch West Indies Company decided, not being particularly good commercially, they hadn't found any spice islands, you know, the beaver trade wasn't making them a whole lot of money, the guys from the East India Company were laughing at them back in Amsterdam. They thought, instead of actually setting up an industry in Brazil, we'll do what we do best, we'll go to war and nick the Portuguese one. So they took over all the Portuguese possessions there. And they did something quite clever. They needed settlers to come from Europe to work in these sugar plantations and mills and farms and all that they had in Portuguese Brazil. And they got an awful lot of Portuguese Jewish people who had fled from Portugal and Spain to Holland, because Holland was a place of religious freedom, if you do whatever you like, really. And they then got a chance to go down and take over sugar plantations and be farmers that had been taken over from their former colonial oppressors in Portugal. So it was this strange triangular trade, and many of them, sort of Dutch Brazilians, moved up to another colony in line, Dutch Guiana, and from there they taught the Caribbean people to distill. Starting with Holdup and Drax, they sent an exploratory party from Barbados up to Essequibo in Dutch Guiana, because they wanted to learn how to distill, how to manage sugar for sure. But they had this idea that distilling wasn't getting the attention that it needed, and that they could make a lot more money from their sugar plantations. Within the shortest amount of time, Barbados had become incredibly rich. It's a tiny little island compared to Jamaica or anywhere else, but it had become like the Silicon Valley of its day. Obviously, the sugar industry is one that's fueled largely by misery. Anyone ever tried harvesting sugarcane? It sucks. And when you study the history of sugarcane cultivation, it's bastards end to end. No one has ever had any fun. My favorite fact from studying the origins of rum and the sugar industry is that the first majority population of slaves in the Caribbean were Irish. After Oliver Cromwell conquered Ireland, my native country, he had a rather novel wheeze. I think will probably go down well with the modern governments. He sold his prisoners of wars as slaves. So he didn't have to pay to keep them prisoners, and also he got rid of them because he sold them to plantation holders in places like Barbados. He called it being Barbadoed. So after the siege of Drogheda, which is close to where I'm from, he sold several hundred prisoners of war to be slaves in Barbados. And they were the first majority population of slaves. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out well. After a year, every plantation owner who had bought Irish slaves wrote to the English government and said, whatever you do, don't send us any more Irish people. So such is my ethnicity that we failed at being slaves. Most rum histories start in 1493 in the later visits when Christopher Columbus arrived at Hispaniola. And this is also, realistically, our historical date for Caribbean mixology, because he was loaded up with sugar planters from the Canary Islands. His wife was actually, and her family were all in the sugar business. His first mission wasn't actually very successful, but he brought the people, and he also had citrus with him. Whenever sailors in that time of, in those centuries traveled, they planted citrus all along the route because they knew they'd need it coming back. They also did it in places like New Orleans. And that led indirectly to, for instance, an orange being abandoned on the island of Curacao, which indirectly led to fine products like the Pierre Ferrand dry Curacao. So he was loaded down with what some people said were crab lemons, limes, a ton of sugar planters, and all that was missing then for your holy trinity of rum drinks was rum, of course, and ice. Our other mixological history date is, of course, 1740, when the English Admiral Vernon mandated that the daily rum ration be watered down, which made him hugely popular, as you might imagine, mixed with lime juice. I'm sure in the room as full of rum connoisseurs as we all here, you know that English people are called limeys because the English Navy bought limes instead of lemons because it was just a bit cheaper. That's all it took. And sugar, so to mask the power of the rum and the sourness of the lime. So you've got a grog, rum, lime, sugar, and water, because Vernon wore a coat which was early waterproofing. It was called groggum, so everyone nicknamed this watering down grog. And the rum ration for the English Navy was, of course, rescinded in 1970. They thought it might not be a great idea to give half a pint of rum every day to the guys who were running the nuclear submarines. And also in England, there were concerns that a sailor coming off duty would get breathalyzed driving home from a nuclear submarine because they just introduced the breathalyzer there. So Black Tot Day occurred in 1970. So another famous old drink, which is very, very murky history indeed, is the Dracachito. You might have read about this in Cuba, The Legend of Ron by Jared and Anastasia, or other things. It was first codified in a book in 1838 by a Cuban author who said, I have a Dracachito and it suits me very well. And a Dracachito is a mojito without the fizzy water. It's said to date, this is where it gets really dodgy, from 1500s, named after Sir Francis Drake, who was a pirate, really. To be precise, a privateer. And Drake got a license from the English government to prey on ships, especially the Spanish. Everyone hated the Spanish. Galleons full of treasure, so long as he gave the English government about 10 or 20%. Privateers were a great way for a mother country to protect its colonies for free. They didn't have to maintain an army or a navy. They just had to allow the privateers to operate under a letter of privateering and rake in 10%. So Drake was a privateer and a particularly successful and fairly vicious one. And he apparently drank rum, lime, sugar, water, and a little bit of all the nonsense stories about rum and mixology. That's the most nonsense one that we will teach you today. So. And then, of course, we got into Tiki in the 1930s. And I'm not going to talk a great deal about Tiki when I'm sitting next to these guys, but one of the interesting facts is that Tiki was given a shot in the arm during World War II because German U-boat submarines made shipping to and from Europe all but impossible. So that meant that America wasn't getting imported liquor either. Having just come out of Prohibition, it only put rum into this upward spiral that continued for quite a while. But I'm going to hand over to Jeff now to talk a little bit more about Tiki from this period onwards. Mr. Berry.
So what rum cocktail and why after Prohibition? Basically the answer to the why was rum was cheap as dirt. After Prohibition ended and Americans can finally get their beloved whiskey and gin again, which they couldn't get during Prohibition if they weren't near the Canadian border and get Canadian whiskey. And if they wanted gin, they were going to get bathtub gin or something that could kill you, or something adulterated with this stuff called Jamaican ginger, which was like 160 proof ginger extract that people would try to pass off as a gin additive, and that caused something called the Jake leg, which basically paralyzed you from the waist down. And it was a dangerous proposition to drink whiskey and gin during Prohibition. So people drank rum. Why? Because rum runners coming from very nearby Cuba or Barbados would bring in actual bonded real stuff. The label that was glued to the bottle was probably genuine, and you weren't going to die or become paralytic if you drank it. So when Prohibition finally ended and all of the people of means, culture, sophistication, who they wanted their gin martinis again, and they wanted their old fashions and their slug of whiskey over ice, which was the only respectable thing for a gentleman to be drinking at that point. And the rum runners who had made a fortune during Prohibition now found themselves with product they could not get rid of. Nobody wanted it anymore. It was cheap. You could get it for 70 cents a quart. So this gentleman, Ernest Raymond Beaumont Gant, alias Don the Beachcomber, who knew a thing or two about how to make rum drinks because he had spent time in the Caribbean with his quote-unquote grandpappy. He wrote an uncompleted memoir about taking rum running trips with his grandfather to Cuba, Haiti, and Jamaica. He said, well, I'm not going to buy this expensive gin and whiskey from these distributors. I'm going to buy cheap as dirt rum, and I'm going to make drinks that people are going to want to drink because I know how to do it. Nobody else really knew how to do that, at least on the West Coast. Because people on the West Coast during Prohibition, if they wanted to get tanked legitimately, they'd drive down to Mexico and drink in Tijuana, and they weren't drinking daiquiris and mojitos and El Presidentes down there. They were just drinking whatever was slung at them. So for them, when Don the Beachcomber opened up his place in 1934 and was serving these exotic rum cocktails, these amazing punches and slings and all this stuff, this was new and exciting, and it was a whole new way to drink. And it just took off like a rocket, and he made a very nice markup on his cocktails, which was kind of swallowed up, though, because he was an artist, he was a perfectionist, he wasn't just out for a buck. The profits margin was probably swallowed up by all the other stuff he was doing. He was making his own liqueurs, he was making his own bespoke syrups. He was basically doing the craft cocktail thing 70 years before there was a word for it. Always using fresh citrus. He had an ice program. He did shaved ice. He put it into molds around the straw. He called these drinks, which were just as beautiful to look at as they were to taste, rum rhapsodies. And he basically created this 40-year craze. In a few years, he had 150 imitators from coast to coast. A few years after that, he had even more. So how did he use rum that in a way that distinguished him from anybody else who'd been using up to that time? For him, which rum cocktail and why? Okay, why? Because rum is cheap. But now, which rum? He found that for him, if you're making a heavy-bodied punch, which he liked to do, like the Zombie is basically a turbocharged Planter's punch, with multiple syrups and multiple juices instead of just lime and sugar, very often, out of one bottle, you couldn't get a spirit that had the same density, the same body, the same character that the rest of the ingredients were creating. Maybe it fell a little short. Well, what do? You beef it up, take another rum from another region. But for Don, whose Zombie had multiple juices, multiple syrups, a very layered, mysterious, exotic tasting drink, because nobody had had these flavors mixed together in a glass before. Nobody had had cinnamon syrup in a drink before. Now everybody in every craft bar does it, but back then he probably invented that. And he found that just one plain old Jamaican punch rum wasn't really carrying the weight of all these other layers. So, all right, what if I take this heavy, floral, molassesy, sweet Jamaican rum, and I add another layer to it? What if I take a rum from Guyana, a Demerara rum, which has a smoky, charred wood, much more dried out, desiccated wood taste? What if I mix these two together? Well, the two rums inform each other. The dark, sweet Jamaican now has another added dimension of this smoky, gunpowdery layer to it, and you have a much more interesting base. But Don didn't stop there. What if you took another rum? What if this rum was still a little bit too sweet, a little bit too wet? What if I take a Cuban rum, medium-bodied Cuban rum, much drier kind of spirit and lighter, and cut those other two rums with it? He would do this with up to 4 rums. The legend has it that he used up to 6 or 7. Not true. The most he ever used was 4. Usually he would just use 2. But he had the edge over everybody else who was imitating him for 2 reasons. One was that he was a master of, he could have taught the NSA a thing or two. He was a master of secrecy. Nobody really knew what went into his drinks. These were very, very valuable, profitable trade secrets. The other edge he had over everybody who was trying to imitate him in all these copycat bars around the country was that he had actually been to the Caribbean, he'd been to all the different islands, he'd tried all the different rums. And nobody else in the States really had a clue about the vast flavor spectrum of rum. Rum is probably the most difficult base spirit category to get a handle on. Rum is like wine. A dry, light Cuban rum has as much in common with a black Jamaican rum as Chablis does with Pinot Noir. The spectrum is enormous. And then there's so many iterations in between as you go from island to island and region to region, where distillers all independently of each other came up with different distillation methods. Some distilled raw sugarcane juice, others distilled from molasses, as Philip was saying. They had different terroir, the cane grew in different soil. They used different aging methods. They aged in different kinds of barrels. So you had this like weird, very complicated Rubik's Cube of different flavors of rums from different regions. Don understood them. He knew about them. Nobody else did, really, at least on the West Coast. And he knew that he could take a Guyana rum and a Jamaican rum and a Cuban rum and turn them into something that no one bottle could give you. So that's the why of Tiki, basically.
Well, I think now we're at a stage, and this is where we can have a little bit of a Q&A. We have to move along quite quickly. We've got a lot of cocktails coming out. A tyranny of choice. In the last 100 years, the brand was invented, but also the multinational drinks company was invented. And the logistics of shipping stuff around the world have never been more efficient and reliable and cheaper. Obviously, not when it comes to shipping stuff to Tales of the Cocktail, but in general, logistics costs have gone through the floor. So now you could have almost anything you want. You could have 20 white rums in your bar. You know, you could have 100 rums in total. The question now is, you have so many things to choose from. Which ones do you choose? It's a tyranny of choice. I mean, you have many rums in your bar, Martin, but even for you, you've got limited shelf space. So.
Yeah, that's actually what limits the selection right now at the bar. We have 540 rums right now, and I have about 300 more different ones off-site. And I'm just kind of rotating things in as they come and go, and things, one-offs and one-of-a-kinds disappear, and I move things in. And 540 is both the limits pretty much of my shelves and of the patience of my staff, who are largely like, if you swear to God, if you bring another damn rum in here, Martin, I swear to God, we spend so much time just walking around trying to find stuff. It's chaos. We're not, for those of you who have visited the Cove, you know it's not a particularly well-designed bar. It's, you know, you work with what you've got and you inherit what you get, et cetera. So it was a little bit, things go in various nooks and crannies, and it becomes kind of an exciting game of where's Waldo the rum. We're kind of the best bar for rum from a consumer standpoint for selection and choice, but we're sort of terrible if you're a brand, because we really dedicate the idea that our menu is 75 drinks. It takes 33 different rums to make. We don't have that, you know, well rum is a really bad word in my world. It's the right rum for the right drink, or the right blend of rums for the right drink for historic reasons, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of brands never get quite the play that they would get in a setting where it was the go-to brand. Like if this, you know, this particular, something nice and flexible like Grand Reserve 5 or something that could be used in a lot of applications. See what I just did there? And something like that, where, you know, you might see a little more action on it, but for a lot of brands, for me, they're very frustrated sometimes. And, you know, and there are, white rum is an interesting point that you mentioned, because there's a lot of white rums that I don't even bother to carry, and not because they're bad even, but simply because nobody's going to call them. You know, like, this is a perfectly good white rum, but nobody's ever going to ask for this. Nobody's going to sip it neat. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't have any particular reason to carry it, though. I'm only going to have white rums that I think are sort of exceptional, you know, like Plantation 3-Star. And
he's good.
See what I did there? Thank you. You know, I'm only going to have a handful of things that I really think are really exceptional, or that I can work with in various ways. So, as Phil rightly said, we do have this tyranny of choice. We have so many things we can choose from. And when I go into craft bar after craft bar, and they say, hey, we've got this great daiquiri. You've got to try our traditional daiquiri. It's the classic. It's just lime and sugar, and we make it the way they used to make it in Cuba. And I say, cool, what rum are you guys using? Oh, you know, we're using a blend of a Barbancourt and El Dorado. And I go, what? I mean, I'm pretty sure they didn't use that in Cuba. Pretty sure. You know, I mean, it doesn't mean it tastes bad. That's important. I mean, it's important to remember that lime and sugar are rum's best friends. And they all, you know, virtually every rum gets along with lime and sugar. I mean, can't think of anything off the top of my head that doesn't. But you got to kind of ask yourself, what would taste good? What would taste right? Would it be, you know, it's not that original dark overproof doesn't taste lovely in a daiquiri, and it does. Is this what you would have gotten in Cuba? No. I mean, it's just different. It doesn't make it a bad drink. Food for thought, that's all.
That brings us on to our next thing. We now have FOMO, fear of missing out. It used to be enough to make a nice cocktail. But actually, because of the internet, because of great research by people like Martin and Jeff, because of great research by spirits producers like Alexandre, we think there might be something within our grasp, like the perfect cocktail, a daiquiri made exactly like in 1896. And we pursue it without realizing that the products were different then, and people's palates were different then. And we're making drinks for people today. So this Apollonial ideal that somehow, if you could travel back in time and get bottle X and the sugar they had then and the kind of ice that Frederick Tudor was shipping. And that leads us on very neatly to both the drink that's plopping down in front of you and the Mai Tai. Here's a picture of Dr. Ronald Mancini on the right. He is the last person to buy the famous $1,475 Mai Tai at the Merchant Hotel in Belfast. They had I think an ounce left over in the bottle. They had a bottle of J. Ray and Nephew, 17-year-old, cost I think £26,000, dollars, Martin?
20 pounds.
Pounds. And they sold it by the shots in a £1,475 Mai Tai each time. And the guys took the money and used it to come to New York and open the Dead Rabbit. But we're going on to the Mai Tai here, and we have the two heavyweights of it. But our first Mai Tai, before we get into the Mai Tai wars, the religious debates about it, is made with Plantation 3-Star, which I'm sure you might have had a Mai Tai in the back of your mind when you're coming up with this, Alexandre. But could you say a few words about it and let us taste it?
Well, I just want to preface this real quickly to say I was listening carefully to you guys. It's an honor and a pleasure for me. I'm listening to you. In French, we say it's du petit lait. It's music to my ears to hear guys like you now, talking about the terroir of rums, where 20 years ago when I was trying to sell my cognac barrels to rum producers, they were looking at me like somebody coming from another planet. So I think we came a long way, and it's a great pleasure. For white rums, there's the way what I've done, originally, and I also want to say one thing, is that for some of you who don't know me, I'm a cellar master. I'm trained in cognac, 20 years. And then when you're producing cognac, it's like playing classical music. You were talking about the world of wine. The music is written, and that's really how you play it. And sure, you can play it differently, but cognac is classical music by a lot of ways. And once again, the liberty is how you interpret this. When you go into the world of rum, when I first went to the Caribbean at the distilleries, I felt like a kid in a candy store. I felt somebody was watching over my shoulder who was going to slap me in the face and say, you can't do this, because I saw pot stills of every shape, every forms. And I think, whereas, to make an easy parallel, I think rum is really, to me, like free jazz. It's really, the limit is your imagination. You see Collins stills, you see pot stills, you see stills that were in existence back then and they're not in existence right now. You see the John Doerr pot still, which is my little dear, the pot still I prefer that makes this very chewy, very textured rum. And, we're trying to work and still perfecting these, and this is legal, what we're doing here. That's the beauty of rum. So what I did is, and I'm going to the point, Phil, don't worry, is understanding, and which cocktails, which rum, the terroir of rum. Rum has a capital S at the end. I even say rum is a verb. I like when a drink rums. It's got that very exotic, this really thick, taste, and to me that rums. And really what we tried to do, and when you look at white rum and the way it went, for me, you had rum morphed and changed in times to either the very light rums or what we call at Plantation the super lights. And then a lot of people would say, hey, they're not that great, or I don't like them. It's not that. It's just there's not much going on. So there's nothing not to like or to like. They're just quite neutral, and not a judgment. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the rhum agricole, which is a really very interesting take on rum, but in that case, very specific, a certain herbal, distilled in the Collins still, so a little bit secondé. You always have that specific taste that you get from Collins still as opposed to pot. And I thought it would be neat to create a white rum that would have texture, would have taste, would have balance, but not necessarily be, along the line of a rhum agricole that has a certain grassiness, I find. I usually love the nose, and sometimes I feel a slight disconnect. I don't know. In France, I could be hanged for the last sentence I just said, but I'm still alive, thank God. Bastille Day was just 2 days ago.
So
it's too late. I cannot be guillotined anymore. So, anyway, just to finish on this is, I've understood and researched with Plantation the terroir of rum, and understanding, for example, you are talking about Barbados. And Barbados understands something extremely well. maybe more than anybody, and maybe because of the history, what the column still brings in. You know, column still makes a lighter style of spirits, and then the pot still brings in texture, handles. And instead of trying to make like a column still that has texture, they use the column still for what it is, giving a support, a base that's kind of, and then using a heavier pot to blend the two together. Now in cognac, we only use the pot still, and we kind of precious about the pot still, you know. And then I've learned about this, and I thought using a Barbados as a base in that sense, having that great taste element you can add on, and then you can use a little more pot if you want, pot still, rum, and you know, to the base. And then I thought that would be interesting. Then now just think, for some of you who know Jamaica, if you use the higher esters rum, in that case 100% pot still with that ripe banana overtones, extremely rummy, that in the blend would bring even more texture. Then you have Trinidad. The Trinidad nowadays masters wood management. You know, the wood management is what we call the use of wood, you know, what you do with the barrels. A lot of people think aging a spirit is just sticking it in the barrel and hoping for the best. Well, you know, it's not like this. You have to take care of the barrels like you raise a child, really. And then in Trinidad, the team in Trinidad, I think I have a few friends from Augusta are here, manage extremely well their barrels, the wood extraction, you know, not too much, just the right amount. So having these 3 islands, and of course, if you go to these islands, I love it. They each think they're the stars of the Caribbean. That's, by the way, why we call it the 3 stars. And that's over there, because when you go to Barbados, they say, we invented rum. You go to Jamaica, they say, only in Jamaica you have rum. Everywhere is not rum. And then you go to Trinidad, of course, this is you know, they think everybody else is a peasant. And that's the city, and there's a lot of very developed island. And they're all great. And my idea as a master blender, you know, being trained as a master blender, I said, by blending these 3, you could both find something that had texture, taste, balance, that would be not a neutral rum, not like, agricole with what we described, which is fine, but really a kind of a triangulation of white rum. And that's what I set myself to do. I decided quite a few years ago to actually put this together and work on a blend, to use the terroirs of rum, and we could talk hours about this, and to capture this and put that into a bottle. And at the end, I was almost satisfied. My team here knows I'm never satisfied, but I was almost there. And I added a 12-year-old vintage Jamaica, to that, just to finish that blend. And I want to finish on a note to say, you see a lot of white rums that are aged rums, and that sometimes is confusing. This rum is aged, and then you take the age out with the charcoal. And it's a bit mind-boggling, I grant you that, because especially charcoal filtration, I will argue, and once again might be a big argument, but taste color, but taste out, the taste out itself. So we use a 3-year-old Trinidad in that case, but we filter it with different system. We have figured out, but we do it in a lot of research at Plantation, that the molecules of tannins in the wood are actually slightly bigger than vanillin, certain other elements of wood aging. So you could actually very naturally, with a specific filter out the tannins, but keep the good stuff that's not as heavy, that would work beautifully in the white rum. For us, it was kind of a ha-ha moment. You know, the rest of my team said I should never say this to anybody. That's the French take, but I like to share. So that's the way we put together the Plantation 3 stars that we are having in this wonderful drink right now.
Let me make 2 points about what he was saying there, because they're very interesting. I think the first one is that you're seeing a lot of new white rums on the market, and I think for those of you who are rum nerds and rum scholars, you already know, I don't have to tell you, that not all white rum is made equally. I mean, obviously, you can taste an enormous range of styles, body, and character in something that, you know, they all look identical on the shelf. There's a lot of new brands, Plantation 3-star included, where they're kind of coming out with these styles where they're saying, yeah, we're going to still do the aged and filtered. We're going to make something that's designed for mixing, but we're not going to quite make it as, shall we say, aggressively rectified. It's going to have a little more body, a little more depth. It's kind of this new world of these medium-bodied whites, and there's a lot on the market now. And they're kind of interesting to explore because it really does mix things up. So I encourage all of you, when you're out and you're picking up bottles retail, to have some fun and explore some of these, because there is actually tremendous variety in there. The second quick point I wanted to make was that you got both these Mai Tais, and my idea was, I said I wanted to make Mai Tais with kind of the most contrasting plantation products I could. So we did the 3-star in one and the Jamaica 2001 in the other. And I think you can, without really any difficulty, hopefully taste a fairly dramatic difference. Plantation 3-star in the Mai Tai, to me, I only chose it for contrast. I think it's not the correct rum. It is an inappropriate rum. It doesn't make it bad Mai Tai, mind you, but it's not the right rum for the historic style of the Mai Tai, for what Vic was looking for in 1944. I put it like this as a contrast, but I would never serve a Mai Tai with Plantation 3-star. I'd serve a daiquiri with Plantation 3-star, but not a Mai Tai. I don't think this is the correct rum. But the Mai Tai with Jamaica, that's pretty tasty, isn't it? That's good. That's got some good, it's big bottomed rum. Yeah, that's nice. Anyway.
But just
2 cents delivered.
I just want to add on to this because I think it's, as a master blender, you know, we always say when you do a blend, and I think behind the bar, and mind you, I always say I'm here to build the instrument and you guys behind the bar play the music. So, but my advice as a maker, as a master blender and a distiller, is to really understand and taste straight a lot of spirits. You know, I do 60 to 80 barrel samples every day. Why shouldn't you? You know, and I think that's very important because once you understand this, especially with rums, with this diversity, and I love these 2 takes on the specific drink, because this is wonderful. The possibilities are endless. And you see what Jamaica does to a drink right there, you know. And that is a drink that is rumming, don't you think? I think it's got that rum taste you have. So I think picking the right rum, which this is the issue today, what we're talking about, and that's what we're doing with Plantation, trying to offer very specific rums with a sense of terroir, and we've done a lot of research with this because I think it's something that in rum needed to be done, and that's a mission for me.
To that end, what you have here, when you have a string of all equally admirable spirits, which, as Martin said, not all of them are right for the right cocktail, there's a point at which, I mean, you use your instinct, you use your own personal palate and everything. Instead of saying to people who are asking what rum for what cocktail, instead of saying, well, historically, you have to do this, to speak to what Phil was saying, historically, this is what they did. There's a great quote that I want to read you by Kazuo Ueda, a Japanese bartender who wrote a little bar guide, Cocktail Techniques. Think about how the cocktail itself wants to be made. Think about how much of your own personality you can blend into that. You use the standard recipe as a framework within which you create your own unique cocktail. Then he says, this process is vital. And this is my favorite part. You have to engage the cocktail. You have to ask it what it needs to make it better. It's like, let the drink tell you. Don't let somebody who writes cocktail books tell you. Let the drink tell you, and the drink really is you. I mean, it's you telling you how you like it to taste, and if you like it, it's a good drink. But of course, the more you know about the spirit and about the cocktail, the more informed you are to make that choice. But I love that line: the drink will tell you how it wants to be made. You know, so anyway.
That's absolutely, that's a fantastic point. One thing I actually did try and it didn't work, I tried like hell because I see a lot of craft guys doing it, is I did a number 3, classic daiquiri number 3 with the maraschino with agricole, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, I didn't think maraschino liqueur and agricole got along particularly famously. I thought it was kind of nasty, and I see it on a lot of menus too, and it's one of those ones where every so often you do hit something and you go, oh yeah, that really doesn't work, at least not for me. That's kind of the shits. So I think so those are out there. I mean, it is a diverse enough spirit where it's not bulletproof. We're getting a third Mai Tai, right, with the mix, the blend of the 2.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Coming out.
I think it'll be fun.
But you and Jeff have gone backwards and forwards about the origins of the Mai Tai and this Apollonial ideal. You got different points of view. But how do you think people can approach a Mai Tai in their regular bars to make a good Mai Tai? Maybe not the original one. So.
Well, that's a really good question, actually, because I've been trying to spec out our Mai Tai for Latitude 29. In fact, all this week I've been trying a lot of it, and that's maybe why I'm a little shaky right now. And I found that for years, because it was the gospel, it was from the Bible, Trader Vic's Bartender's Guide. This is his recipe. This is how he made it. And I always went to Trader Vic's and tried it, and I always really liked it. It was just a quarter ounce of orgeat almond syrup, a quarter ounce of sugar syrup, half ounce of curacao, and then 2 ounces of rum, 1 ounce each of an agricole and a Jamaican to sort of recreate the flavor of the original rum that was used, which Martin will be speaking to in a moment. And for years I did that, and I like a lot. I don't like sweet drinks. I like a tart drink. So he always said juice of 1 lime, and that was the one imprecise thing about that always threw me, because when I first started making drinks from that book in the 1990s, when I had no map at all, limes in California where I lived were ginormous. The juice of 1 lime was like 2 ounces in the drink, and that's how I made my Mai Tai, because that's what Vic said, juice of 1 lime. Gradually over the years, it decreased that to 1 ounce, and I found out that a lot of people, use smaller limes. So maybe, and I would watch them make it at Vic's, and maybe they only got like a half an ounce to 3/4 of an ounce in there because of this juice that they was using. But I found 1 ounce was about right, and now that I'm trying to make a drink that I'm going to actually sell and that people are going to like, or else I'm going to get crucified, because there's a certain amount of expectation. I've been endlessly ripping that drink apart and trying a million different variations. I'm finding that I like a lot more orgeat now. I like a lot more almond. It's supposed to be, as Trader Vic's menu said, a whisper of almond. That was his description. But I'm just upping that and upping that and upping that, and it keeps going higher and higher and higher. And again, it's just like the drink is telling me now how it wants to taste, basically.
And on the other side of the debate, Mr. Cate.
So we know the story of the Mai Tai, right? I'll go over really fast, right? In 1944, Vic's in his service bar. His friends Ham and Carrie come in. He's messing around. He's playing around with drinks with his lead bartender, and he comes up with this magical thing. As he said, I took down a bottle of 17-year rum. It was Ray and Nephew from Jamaica, surprisingly golden in color, medium body, but the rich, pungent flavor, particular to the Jamaican blends. We know the original formula. Jeff just said it. 2 ounces of Ray Nephew 17, the orange curacao, the rock candy, the orgeat. So he starts expanding. Vic's grows. The chain expands. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon, he's starting to exhaust the supply. The popularity of the Mai Tai is so huge that the 17-year, he just can't get his hands on it anymore. So he starts thinking, I got to figure out something else. He said, between 1944 and 1950, the success of the Mai Tai and its acceptance soon caused the 17-year rum to become unavailable. So we substituted it with the same fine rum with 15 years on it to maintain the outstanding quality. Then he started to say, by the 1950s, the supply of the 15-year-old rum was becoming less dependable, so several other Caribbean products were tested for the same high qualities of flavor. Red Heart and Caruba, for those of you who know what Caruba is, that is an unaged black rum, very little age on it, just heavily colored rum. Blended with the original 15-year, stretched the supply and maintained the character. So his first adjusted formula was 15-year plus Caruba. Now that's kind of an interesting twist, because why would he suddenly switch to, well, he still wanted something that tasted Jamaican, but he didn't want to pay for the age. And here's a deep, dark, dirty secret. He was really cheap, super cheap. So then he runs out of the 15-year. He's having problems getting London Dock, and he says, so I started buying a private label 8-year and a 15-year. He started making one, and then he says, this rum, though, didn't get the end flavor. That desired nutty and snappy flavor was added by the use of Martinique rum. Now that, when you see all of a sudden, now it's Trader Vic's brand Jamaican plus Martinique. And he says either Trader Vic's brand or St. James. Now that's really interesting, because all of a sudden you're thinking, wait a minute, you're drinking all these Jamaican variants, you're adding a different dark Jamaican, you're adding Caruba, and all of a sudden you think, yeah, I need more of that Jamaican flavor, Martinique. Right? Those of you who know your agricole are thinking, that doesn't really seem to make sense. So that's what I said. What? Are you mad, you old bugger? It doesn't make sense. Next slide again. That's our friend Don in front of Ray and Nephew. As of course, he bottled many of his own labels as well. But here's Don's menu. Look what he says about Martinique rum. Heavy-bodied, medium pungency, not as dry as Cuban, nor as rummy as the Jamaican. That's kind of a vague description, isn't it? And wouldn't you think, if you were describing Martinique agricole rum, as we understand agricole rum, wouldn't you think he'd say something like grassy, like one of the big obvious notes about agricole rum? This is Don's Martinique rum selection. None of those, to my knowledge, are agricoles. What these are rum traditionels. These are molasses rums produced, pot still, molasses rums produced in Martinique. all those brands, Blackhead, which used to be called something else that you're not supposed to say, Blackhead Rum, all these brands were produced by a handful of the remaining producers in Martinique who made molasses rum. And that's what they were sending to the States. They were keeping the agricole for themselves. They were sending the low-cost, lightly aged, heavily colored Martinique rum, Martinique molasses rums. Sorry, I told you this was going to get nerdy. Take a look at Trader Vic's Book of Food and Drink, which he wrote the same thing. He wrote it in 46. He said the same thing in 47 in the revised 72 edition. He said, Martinique rums, coming to those French, they're usually heavy in body, coffee-colored. Coffee-colored? Coffee-colored, very similar to Jamaican rums, but in many cases have the dry, burned flavor of the Demerara. Does that sound like any AOC rum agricole you've ever drank? Not really. And take a look at his brands as well. The only brand on there is Rum St. James. The only agricole on his list is Rum St. James. Now, he would go on to specify St. James in his recipes, and he would say St. James in some of his old, I've seen like a 1955 typed up postcard where he said St. James. Did he say that because it's what he actually used, or did he say that because they thought it would sound flash because it was, the most expensive agricole he had? That's my theory. This is not a proven theory. It's just a theory. Anyway, so by the 1960s, he starts making his own private label Mai Tai rum. And he said, this rum was made to recapture. First, he skillfully blended Jamaican rums, then he added Martinique rum for its elusive and wonderful nut-like flavor. Does anybody think agricole rum tastes particularly nutty? I mean, maybe with a little bit of French oak, but to me, I'm just not seeing, this doesn't sound like agricole, that's all. So he put his own thing together. I tried to make a combination of Puerto Rican rum, Martinique rum, a high ester Jamaican, and a Guinea rum, and it was pretty close. And after mixing the rums with the other ingredients we use in the drink, you couldn't tell the difference. That's, cranky old Vic. That's why we love him. So, the fact that he started mixing stuff with Virgin Islands rum, talk about, filler. That's just, sorry. But today, were you to go out to a store and buy Trader Vic's Mai Tai rum, don't buy this rum. Whatever you do, this is garbage. This is a shadow its former self. I have the 1960s Mai Tai rum, and it's actually pretty good. But this stuff is just poison. It's unaged, neutral, flavored garbage. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame. So in 2007, as we started to talk about with that slide from the merchant, right? In 2007, 6 bottles, look just like this, were unearthed from the lab at J. Ray and Nephew, and they were sent to the UK. And this stuff was, as it says, 17-year-old Trader Vic, which he did start doing a private label back in the day, Trader Vic rum. This is really interesting stuff, which the Mr. McFadden and other English people drank with Coke to a plum. So they have confessed to me. But this is a lab sample. This is a lab sample, and this was a barrel sample that was pulled and bottled for lab use, probably at the time in the 1950s. This is 75.2%. This is the right distillate and the right age, but this is not the product Trader Vic would have used, because the product Trader Vic would have used is a lower proof. But this stuff was a sensation. This stuff was an absolute sensation when it hit. You can see this from BBC. It did go on auction. Almost all of it got drank. Mr. Burrell still has 1 bottle unopened. It's not like this was bad rum. This was probably crazy delicious. But this is not the retail rum. So as you see, they were selling it. They set this Guinness Book of World Records for being the most expensive cocktail in the world. They were selling it for $1,475. Like I said, though, I bet that Mai Tai was delicious. But it's not the retail 17-year. This is not what Vic would have actually used. Vic's product, which he would have actually used, would have been about 86 proof. Now, the thing is, nobody has ever seen this bottle. Nobody has ever found Ray and Nephew's 17-year in the original packaging, so much so that people began to think this may well be a myth. This may well not even be a real rum. But it does show up on menus. You do see it on Don's menu, 17-year Ray and Nephew, things like that. So we know it had to exist somewhere, but nobody has ever seen it until now. Gentlemen, start your Instagrams. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the real deal. That is Ray and Nephew's 17-year on my deck, taking a picture of it. Anyway, so that's my little bombshell. But it is unopened, and it's going to stay that way. But it's real. I'd love to tell you where I got it, but I never will. I have sources. I have suppliers. And someone who came to me and said, "Would you be interested in this?" I said, "I'd kill my own grandmother for this bottle of rum." So, anyway, that's my Mai Tai segment. Enjoy.
So, in a bar, unless you're Sean Muldoon and Jack McGarry, you don't get to sell $1,500 cocktails every day. You might have one on the menu to make your $10 cocktails look cheaper. And you've also got to make cocktails for the people that come in, not for the people that you dream might come in. Like Dave Wonders is only going to come in once a week, you know, and dude is cheap. So for the customers that want introductions, that want deliciousness, and that want variation. They don't necessarily want the most amazing drink. They want something personal. There's always going to be something that you can let them enjoy. And that would bring us on to our last drink. Woohoo! We're now going to have a rum Negroni. This is with the Grand Reserve 5-year-old. We all adore rum. There's a room full of rum lovers here. Rum makers, rum pimpers, rum scribes. But rum will only really grow when it breaks out of the rum cocktail category. When it isn't just something you put in rums and cokes and daiquiris and tiki drinks. When you begin to think, well, I'm going to have this drink, but with rum. I'm going to have a rum Manhattan, or in this case, I'm going to have a rum Negroni. We're going to get the Negroni two ways. We're going to get it with Grand Reserve 5-year-old and with the Trinidad Overproof. I'm assuming, you know, that there's a religious war, much like the Mai Tai one, about the Negroni. There's the breakaway splinter schism sectarian sect that say that this person you've never heard of actually invented it. He was a fourth cousin of da-da-da. And then there's the apparently more popular story, which they all believe in Italy, which is that a rather rock and roll chap called Count Camillo Negroni created the drink, having come back from a refreshing few years as a roostabout and a cowboy in America, and he wanted to have his Americano with gin instead of soda water, which incidentally is a brilliant substitute in almost every cocktail you can think of. And you totally must try it. The standard text, incidentally, exciting news if you want to get another exclusive, was written by a charming Italian gentleman called Luca Picci, who works at Cafe Rialto in Florence in Italy. And it's being translated into English. With a bit of luck, it'll be out towards the end of this year or next year, where he goes into greater detail than I have time or inclination to right now. But first off, we're going to taste this. We didn't really talk a lot about the Grand Reserve 5-year-old. So if I give you a minute, Alexandra, and go.
That's going to be very hard. Well, here with the 5-year-old Grand Reserve Barbados, we're really into the core of what Barbados is. Actually, I encourage you to taste the two expressions that are rather similar in style, different in age, is the 5-year-old Grand Reserve and the 20th anniversary all the way to the right, which is more, if you will, and I don't like that word, a sipping rum, more because it's much older. That's actually a little parenthesis. The only rum I didn't blend, was done as a surprise to me when I was heading Ferrand for 20 years, and I loved it so much, we decided to launch it. It's a bit of a show-off. That's like Jimi Hendrix playing a solo for you. The guys wanted to impress me, and they really did. But the 5-year-old is typical Barbados, a Bajan rum, in the sense that you're using Colin Still for what it is, bringing a nice base to work on, and a beautifully, nicely distilled pot still rum to create that texture and that balance. I think in a lot of ways Barbados got that done to perfection. Also, what I forgot to mention, that's a key thing, we do something with Plantation Rum where we use double aging, aged in Caribbeans. We bring them back to cognac where we finish them in a cognac cask. Now that sounds like maybe a crazy, wacky idea. In the old days, you know, not so many rums were aged in the Caribbeans. I've studied a lot about rums, as you can imagine, and I've discovered very unusual things. For example, in the early days, Jamaica, because you make barrel with what? with oak, right? Oak trees. How many oak trees grow in the Caribbeans? Not that many, right? I've tried a lot of things, but I never tried to make a barrel with a coconut tree, but I'm sure that wouldn't be so good, right? So what happened in the Caribbean very often to be the Caribbean aging when when really bourbon became such a big product that you could actually buy second-hand bourbons and ship to the Caribbeans. Before that, in Jamaica, rum was stored in leather pouches, goat leather pouches. I'm glad we grew out of that trend, but I always was wondering, what would a rum aged in a goat would taste like? But really, there was a big evolution, obviously, in rum. With Barbados, in that sense, so with plantation, we have the double aging, because tropical aging has a very high angel share and tends to create such an evaporation at the beginning, you get rid of the lighter esters. But then in a longer time, you tend to lose a little too much, I feel. So we do that double aging. And that's an old tradition where a lot of rums were aged what they call continentally, either in continental Europe or the UK, and that's arbor rums. That was most of the aged quality rums were produced that way, with that double aging or even single aging back in Europe. That's a long subject, what barrel brings what, but that's the balance. And I think Barbados lends itself extremely well. Jamaica does too, by the way. But it's creating balance, it's creating elegance. It's something where you have both the molasses feel, the richness of rum, yet the finesse. And tannins from the French oak brings this forward. So you do have the rum dimension, but also, what I love is this balance in the rum. You have the taste, but also you have a long finish. This is something that stays with you. And I think in a cocktail, we always say, very often the cocktail is being tasted with the palate, but also the aromatics are very important, I feel. And Barbados has that. So the 5-year-old, in that sense, is create that really, like you were saying, great to blend. But, when you're looking for well-balanced rum, this is perfect, I like to say.
Does everybody have both the Negronis? Finding two rums that are going to face up against Campari, that's not easy, right? I mean, sometimes Campari wins and sometimes it loses, and I think you should notice a pretty good contrast here. And it's not just because the Trinidad is overproof. That's not the only reason. It's body too. It's not merely proof, but proof certainly helps in the war against Campari in a drink. So.
It's in case you don't know, the second one is made with the Trinidad Overproof, which is a refreshing 73% alcohol or 146 proof, as you'd say.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you move to New Orleans. But it doesn't blow your head off, because the Negroni is such a great recipe. It will mellow out insanely powerful things here. So in this sense, the Negroni is a great template to slot rum into. If you made this with a 73% whiskey to make a Boulevardier or a 73% gin, this would your head would just explode. Really, and splatter people with cranial matter. But here, it's rather delicious. It's delicious enough that you'd probably be arrested by one of the policemen on a horse. But this is a great example of where rum's versatility comes to the fore. Lastly, you may have noticed there's a rum on the mat that we haven't tasted. It's not in a cocktail. It's 20th anniversary XO. We only put it on there because we all wanted to have some. So I'd like to raise a toast. And I'd like to say a great round of thanks to all our cocktail apprentices to here today. Without them, all of this, all tales, just doesn't happen. They're 60% of all the work that happens during this week. So, to the caps.
The other 40% is Philip Duff. So let's hear it for Mr. Philip Duff.
Philip, PowerPoint show.